Kia ora and welcome to this short video about using Adobe Illustrator to create an abstracted piece of typography. So this is assuming you've never used Illustrator before. Whenever you open up Illustrator, there's going to be two buttons on there somewhere, Create New and Open. They might be in different locations, but we're just going to go on Create New. And I'm going to go up to the print preset. So we've got some presets along the top here. I'm going to go to the print preset because then I'll be able to find the A4 size. So once you've got A4 selected, over here on the right you can change up some of the details. I like to work in millimeters, and for this demonstration I'm going to work in landscape, but you can choose to work in portrait mode if you like. I'm not going to worry about adding a bleed on for this one, and I'm going to switch this over to RGB colours, so it's going to give me access to a wider range of colour, and click on Create. I'll just minimise this. So when you open Illustrator, one of the first things you need to do is set up your workspace. So this is how I've got mine set up on my studio. There'll be a button somewhere around the top right. It might look different to this, and you pretty much want to pop it to Essentials Classic. Hang on, is Essentials better? No, that's not the one I want. What's an easy way to get there? Typography. That's better. The typography one will be better. What I'm looking for is a place to dock my panels over here. I don't really use the properties panel too much. I want to make sure that I've got this two stack here. So we've got the file menu up the top and the contextual menu along there, and we've got the toolbar on the left. So for now I'm going to pop mine back to a pre-saved workspace just because it gives me a little bit of extra room. As you can see, I don't use the properties panel on the right. I'm on a laptop and it shows that I have all my panels docked nicely over here, so if I need the layers I can click on that and open it out, and if I need transparency I can pop it open and shut. It's just a good way of saving space. Down here I have a set of 3 panels docked together, and I use these a lot, so I just keep them down there over on the left. Okay, so one of the tasks that we're going to do is work with choosing a word, breaking that word apart into the individual letters, and then using those as more like graphic elements than letters where we use it to type a word. So I'm going to choose the type tool, so single click on that, and then just do a single click on your page somewhere and type your word. So I'm going to choose the word bicycle. Once you're done typing, just click on the black arrow, the selection tool, and now you can click off it. So one thing you might notice if you've come over from Photoshop is that you do not need to go and manually make layers. If I go over here to the layers panel in Illustrator, we have layer 1 made automatically, and it's got this little toggle or twirl arrow, and I can see that it has automatically made what's called a sub layer, and it has put my word bicycle on there for me. So you pretty much don't need to make a lot of layers. It's rare if I have more than 5 layers. It's quite common for me to have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sub layers. So just letting you know about that, you're not so reliant on the layers panel. Okay, now I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, so I'm going to click on it with the black arrow tool, and when you do that it automatically comes up with some handles around it, and I've just zoomed in a bit. So you can use your favourite zoom in and zoom out commands, same as in Photoshop. I'm using Control Command Space and then click to zoom in. You can use Alt Scroll. You can use Control Command plus minus. Any of those will work. So I want to make this larger. Go out a little bit, and I'm going to hold by the corner. And as you can see, as I do that, because we've got a piece of point type, I can really change the size and shape of those letters, so I can stretch it out really tall or really short. If I want to keep the ratio of the height to the width the same so that the letters themselves don't get distorted, hold Shift, and then I can just drag from any of the corners. So I want to make sure that my word, as I zoom out, sits nicely on the page, and then I can go about choosing a font for it. So I'm going to just hold space and drag my page over a little bit, and that is because I've got the character menu and all the controls up here, typographic controls, for this selected piece of text. So this contextual menu changes depending upon what you're doing. Because I've got this selected, I can click on the character menu and I can choose a new font. So let's go with this one here, Bauhaus 93. You can choose a font that you like. And one thing I'm going to ask you to do is to actually duplicate your text at this point. So to do that, I'm going to start dragging it, click and drag with the black arrow tool, and then I'm going to hold the Alt key. On Mac, this is the Option key. And you can see I get a little double arrow, and I'm just going to drag it and drop it with the mouse up there, and then let go of Alt, let go of Option, and I have a copy up there. That's just in case. So if I ruin this one, I've got another copy saved, which is quite a nice piece of insurance. The next thing I'm going to do is break this apart, because at the moment you can see how it's got this baseline under it. That means it's editable text. So I can go in there, if I grab my text tool, I could change this to a capital I, could change this to a capital B. So that's using the text tool. I could put a whole more C's in there. So you can, it's still something that you can change, and I could of course go in and change the font as well. To go backwards, Control or Command Z, and let's break it apart. So make sure it's selected with the black arrow tool, go up to Type, go down to Create Outlines, and now you'll notice that that baseline that was sitting underneath the letters has vanished, and we can see that when we zoom in we've got the path, the blue path line going around the outside of the letter shapes. You'll also notice that if you get the text tool, the type tool, and hover over it and try, there's nothing for it to click on. There is no text there anymore. It is now just shapes. They are grouped together, which is fine, and you can ungroup them as well. So I like to use Control or Command Shift G, which will ungroup it. If you can't remember that, you can right click on it and choose Ungroup. And if you can't remember that, because it's an object, you can go up to the Object menu, and Ungroup is available up there, and there it is listed, Control or Command Shift G. So this is Shift, Control, Command, G. And when I click off it into any clear space and then click back on, we can see that we have each letter form broken into its own piece. The I, as you'll see here, is two shapes, but they're still grouped together. So you can then start moving them around. And you can immediately completely change how this word looks, if it even still looks like a word. If you've got a letter like this, where it's multiple parts, and say I wanted to move this dot, it's a tittle. If you want to move it, you can right click and choose Release Compound Path, and then you can move that. So now I can use any transform features on this that I like, and Illustrator has the equivalent of the Photoshop free transform handles around it, just by clicking on it with the black arrow tool, you don't need to go Control T, you don't need to apply edit free transform, it's just there already. So if I hold shift, I can then make these bigger. If I want to make something longer and actually change the shape, I could drag from a top point. If I want to make something wider, I could drag from a side point, and you can see this will distort the letter forms. If I want with this letter Y to actually increase the height of these vertical pieces, you'll notice I've got two arrows up here. So the black arrow, the selection tool, is good for selecting whole things, so groups, whole objects, large things. The white arrow tool is the direct selection tool, and that's really good for selecting smaller things like parts of groups or parts of paths, and I'm going to use that now. If I get the white arrow tool, and if I hover over here, you'll see it is highlighting where we've got some anchor points. I'm going to click on there, and then I can move it. So I want to move, let's undo that, Control Command Z. I want to select this one, and that one, and this one, and that one, so 4 of them. So I'm going to hold Shift, 1, 2, 3, 4. Don't worry about these little white circles, we'll come to those in a minute. So I've got the top 4 anchor points selected, and if I just pull them up, we can make that a lot longer, so you can distort the letter forms themselves. I told you I'd talk about those little circles that appeared in the corner, and see I'm using the black arrow tool again here, and the little corner circles are not there. So I'm going to get the white arrow tool, the direct selection tool, and then we can see them. Now what these are, if I click and drag, they are for editing the roundness of the corners. So let's undo that. If I click once and then again, I can click and edit just one corner versus all of them. So you've just got to take note of which ones are selected. So if it's a click and drag, they'll all change. If you do a single click, see how this one is darker blue and this one is lighter blue, lighter blue, lighter blue. Just this one here will change. And when it gets red, that means it can't bend any further. And that's editable too, so if I've clicked off and deselected it, I can click back on that shape and find the corner point and change it so if I don't want it quite that curved. And I can go and add that sort of feature up here as well. Whoops, click on there. And go for it. This file is currently unsaved, so I'm going to save it just down to my downloads folder. And the next thing I want to look at is how to make shapes, so some basic shapes, because if you're going to play with positive and negative, you need to be able to know how to control colour and how to get different colour apart from white behind your lettering. So I'm going to use the rectangle tool for this up here, and I am going to just click and drag to draw a rectangle. By default this has come out as black. If I don't want it black, I can double click on it. So these are a little bit different from the ones that we've become accustomed to in Photoshop. In Photoshop we have a foreground and a background colour. Here in Illustrator we have a fill colour and a stroke colour. So you can see we've got a black fill but no stroke. So I'm going to double click on the fill, and I'm going to change this to a pale blue. And I'm going to use a pale blue instead of white so I can just keep track of where it is. I like to go back to using the selection tool each time, just so that you can't do too much damage with it. You can move things, but you can't really, like some of these tools, you can severely damage your artwork. This one here, you can move it, but then you can undo it again or reposition it. So if I click off that and then click back on it, you can see that it is selectable and it is hiding whatever is underneath. We have a look in our layers panel, we can see we still just have the one layer, and now if I twirl this open, we can see we've got a whole bunch of sub-layers. So each one of these sub-layers can be turned on and off. You can lock it if you like. So if you lock it, it means you can't grab it. Can be handy to know. Now what I want to do is I want to put this blue behind these letters. So yeah, there's a keyboard shortcut for this, but you can also right click, go down to Arrange, Send to Back. So there's the keyboard shortcut. It's Shift, Control or Command, and then it's the square brackets. So these square brackets are located just to the right of the P key on your keyboard. So now I can see that I have that colour changed in the stacking order, and if I look in here, the blue should be right at the back, which is where it is. So what I'm going to try and do here is make any letter or part of a letter that is on the blue white, so it looks like it's cutting through that blue portion. So I'm going to use the black arrow tool and click on this L, and then I'm going to click down here. There's a little shortcut button here for black and white. If I click on that, it'll give me a white fill and a black outline. Let's just click off that so you can see the black outline. So that's in the stroke. This is known as the stroke. I don't want a stroke on there, so to get rid of it, I will go over here and I'll bring this to the front by clicking on it, and see how it comes to the front. And then down here there's a little red slash, click on that, that means none, no stroke. So if I go in now, we can see that we've just got a white shape. I'm just going to close that helpful colour panel. So that one's easy enough. This one is also completely on the blue shape, so I can repeat that process. Click over here, click on none. But these three here, the Y, the C and the E, they are all partially on the blue panel, and that means that I want this part of this E to be black and this part here to be black, but this part here to be white. How am I going to do that? Well, what we can do is use this blue panel to cut the that shape. Now, this will only work once you've outlined a piece of text. It won't work directly on a piece of text. That's fine. So using a tool like the Shape Builder tool is an option here. However, I'm not going to use that because it's going to get a little bit confusing, simply because it will start cutting things away. So instead what I'm going to do is use the Pathfinder tool. The Pathfinder tool here is a panel, and if you don't have it, you can go up to Window, Pathfinder, and turn it on. So we've got that one available to us. Now there's lots of different buttons on here. I only ever use the two on the left. I use Unite and Divide, and we're just going to be looking at using the Divide command today. So how it works is like the E is going to be a bit like a cookie cutter, and the piece of blue is like our dough. So we're going to place the E on the dough and then cut through with it. Anywhere where the two shapes go over top of one another, for instance, if I hold my cursor here, you can see that there's the line of the blue going vertically down here. It will cut into the E. So I need to first select the E, and then I need to select the blue piece as well. So hold Shift and select that as well. If I zoom out a bit, you can see that the selection indicators go all the way around both of these objects. Using the Pathfinder tool, I'm going to click on Divide here. And things have changed over on the left. I think it brought the whole of the blue panel to the front of the stacking order. We can check that over here. Yep, so we've got it brought to the front and it's grouped together. You can see it says group. just there. So we've now got nested sublayers, and within that we've got 3 pieces of black. So we've got this one here on the left, this one here top right, and this one here lower right. So that matches up with what we're seeing here. And then we've got a couple of pieces of blue. So we've got this large piece of blue here, and then this smaller piece of blue in here. So that matches up with these 2 pieces here. So how are we going to deal with this? We want to be able to change these individually. At the moment, because they're grouped together, we need to ungroup them. Right click, choose ungroup, and now you can see that sub-nesting has vanished. Just close up that for a minute. And now if I click on one of those pieces, I can move it away. If I click on this one here, it will have cut a hole through the blue background. So that is something to be aware of. It is actually going to damage this blue background. If you wanted that blue background to be a single piece, you could have copied it and saved it on another layer. So all I'm going to do is you could delete it, press delete on the keyboard, and that would give you the white background. But to make sure, because I know I want this white, and maybe I've got other elements on my page, I'm actually going to click down here to change it to white with a black outline, and then turn the outline off. So that's the look we get. Okay, I'm going to grab this piece here and right click, arrange, send to back, and I'm going to repeat that process 2 more times. So I'm going to select this Y. I might move it over a bit, so we've got to so just line this part here up. So that's selected, hold shift, select the blue, come to the Pathfinder palette, click on divide, right click, ungroup, grab this piece in here, and then either decide if I want to delete it, or in this case I've just turned it to white. So I actually have a piece of white there. And last one, send this to the back. I'll just use a keyboard shortcut for that. Range, send to back, this is the keyboard shortcut I used. Grab the C, hold shift, grab the background, Pathfinder palette, divide, right click, ungroup, select this piece. Oh, we've got 2 pieces this time, and hold shift and select this piece. Click on the little shortcut for black and white, click on no outline, no stroke, and now we have figured out how to push things, swap their colours and cut them like a cookie cutter. And the last thing I'm going to do is actually select this piece of blue and bring it to the foreground, and I'm actually going to change that to black. So I'm going to double click on it, and it opens the colour picker. Now this is very similar to what you get inside Photoshop. You can use the rainbow hue picker first, and then you can pick your tone in here. So I'm just going to go right down to the bottom corner, just check it's all zeros for the hex code, or all zeros for the RGB, and you will be assured that you have got black versus a very dark grey. And now I've got some little pieces that I need to clean up. So grabbing them, double clicking, choosing black each time is quite painfully slow, so I'm going to use a quicker method. I've got this selected with the black arrow tool. I'm going to grab the eyedropper tool and just slurp up some of the black colour much faster. And over here, click on this piece of blue, eyedropper tool, slurp up the black colour. I think this one's okay. So I now have all of the techniques covered. We've looked at using the text tool, the type tool, to do a single click and make a piece of point type. We've learned how to change the font. We've learned how to duplicate the piece of text. So we've got the editable text on standby should we need it. We've learned how to turn the text into outlines, how to then scale, stretch, squish, just generally play about with those letter shapes, how to move them about your page. What I haven't covered in this video is how to actually design your page, how to prepare and plan your composition. That's something else we'll be doing in class. But we then went and looked at the technique of changing colour by selecting on an item, double clicking over here, and then the last piece was using a panel of colour and a letter form, the letter shape, and the Pathfinder panel using divide and ungrouping it and then recolouring it. So have a play with that technique and see what you can come up with in your own work.